Thanks, Tom, and welcome everyone. My name is Huss. I'm your facilitator here today. On behalf of Reed and the team at Keep Britain Working, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar on how to break into accounting. We hope this session will help empower the next generation of accountants. New research from the AAT shows that accountancy and the finance sector is the third most robust and stable industry after professions such as pharmaceuticals, teaching, and the health sector. Good accountants are the staple of any solid business, especially now during the crisis. You know, their superpowers have extended beyond the number crunching and looking at data and statistics. You know, they can help companies restructure, identify opportunities, access some of Rishi Sunak's government funding, and give you spot opportunities for you to help improve your business. More recently, with automation and AI, accountants are making a real change in terms of delivering not just numbers, but actually giving that valuable advice. They're getting away from doing those mundane tasks and actually becoming more like strategic advisors. They help communicate complex tasks and put it into simple language for people like myself or anyone who's non-financial to get an understanding and where and how we can drive our businesses forward. So our panel here today help represent some of those attributes, and from all the conversations we've had so far, we wanted to show you today why a career as an accountant can be so promising. Now, we're gonna go straight into introductions shortly, but just a little bit of housekeeping. So if you're having any challenges, please do log off and try logging back in. We usually find using another device helps. We're going to have an interactive session. So you'll see on the bottom of the screen a Q&A or a comment section. Please fill in as many questions as you like. We have a moderator online today. Tom will be helping surface those questions in 2 spots. So we'll have one halfway through the session and one towards the end of the session. We encourage you to share as much information or questions as you have. Also a reminder, this session is being recorded, so you'll all be on YouTube at the end of the afternoon. And more importantly, this session, like many of others, thrives on feedback in terms of how we can do better and help improve. So if you post today, you're going to receive an email, and the email is going to include a recording, some advice and tips on what to do to get into accounting. You'll also receive links to the panel, so you can ask them questions further that we couldn't surface in today's webinar. But yes, we really hope you enjoyed this session. And again, thank you for being a part of it. Now, the global pandemic has had a huge impact on the working world. James Reed, our chairman, wanted to share a message to you. It led to redundancies and lots of people being out of work, which means we're in a situation where lots of people are looking for work or considering a career change. Gaining new skills has become even more important. Roles are even more competitive than they've ever been before, and people need extra advice to help them secure that role and help them progress further. So that's why we've been working with the team at Keep Britain Working and Reed to help work with individuals and businesses, and sessions like this help us achieve that. Now, our webinar today is going to cover 4 key areas. 1, how to stand out of the crowd and make sure you secure that job. How to gain the skills you need to get hired. What you need to do to stand out so that you can get hunted. And lastly, what your CV must include. So to introduce our panel, we've got 5 people on our panel here today. I want to start with Alistair. Alistair is a great example of a seasoned finance professional. He's had extensive experience in a variety of industries, working for brands such as Epson, Fujifilm, and for many other boutique businesses. Shalu is referred to at New Look as Miss Moneypenny. She's undergoing further studies in her accountancy, but she's responsible for every marketing pound that gets spent at New Look, and it plays a real key part in some of their investment decisions. Karen has worked in accounting for over 14 years. She brings a real dynamic academic background to our panel here today. her experience of working in education also plays a key part in shaping students, careers, improving their pass rates, but also ensuring that they can e-careers and the team can deliver some of the best accountants in the UK. Francis is a highly talented accountant. He's had experience recruiting for accountants at various levels, but more importantly, he brings a different industry, the tourism and hospitality industry, an industry that has been impacted greatly during the pandemic. And it'll be really interesting to hear his advice and tips on how accountancy has survived during the crisis. And lastly, our final speaker, Teresa. Teresa brings 25 years of finance and accounting experience to this panel, working in lots of different sectors, such as not-for-profit, education, entertainment, and has played a real key part in educating the youth, in giving them an understanding and mentoring on what career choices they can make and how they can become better people. So to our panel, thank you very much for joining us here today. It's a real pleasure. Now, I'm going to start by looking at some of the data across the job industry. One thing you will notice here with this graph, it basically outlines the number of jobs being advertised in the market. Specifically here at Reed, we've noticed that during the start of January 2020, we were at our peak number of jobs being advertised. But as we started progressing through to the pandemic, we realized that the number of jobs being advertised took a significant drop. As we progressed out of the summer, though, we started seeing recovery in lots of key areas, specifically the accounting sector and some of the other sectors we highlighted earlier. And now, if you look at the data, we're almost matching last year, if we aren't already, in terms of our performance, in terms of the number of jobs being advertised in the market. This graph here and this table basically wanted to show you that there's nearly 83% of our accountant employees say that they've experienced some sort of skill shortage. There's a real challenge of finding professionals in this space. Our team at Keep Britain Working have shared that there's 54% of employers plan on recruiting for accountants, so it's a highly desirable industry to get into. So if you're looking to find a job, it's a good time to get in. And more importantly, between now and 2050, the world's going to need another 80,000 accountants here in the UK. So there's definitely popular demand between now and then. Well, we've also noticed the number of jobs being advertised for accountants. It's significant. We currently have nearly 40,000 jobs that were advertised in the accounting space, specifically in the last 12 months. Depending on what level you want to get into, there's plenty of opportunities, whether you're starting at the bookkeeper level or accountant assistant level, right through to some of the more senior positions in accountancy. And when we look at the data, the types of qualifications you need to become an accountant, 20% of the jobs that we have live on the website at Reed here actually require you to have an AET qualification, with 37% of them requiring candidates to be CIMA qualified. And finally, the last data slide. So this is where we actually understand how much we can earn in the industry working as an accountant. We have lots of different levels of different roles you can actually earn as an accountant, starting from payroll assistants right down to management accountants. Depending on what level you get into and what industry, it can be quite a well-paid industry for anyone who wants to change careers. So, Tom, I've covered a lot of data there, so it may be a good understanding to get a flavor for the people here today. So, would you mind surfacing the poll, please?
Of course, yeah. So, for those who came early to the webinar, we quickly posted a survey and asked for your intent behind, the reason why you've attended the webinar today. And we can see from the results here that around about 36% of everybody on the call are considering a career change. So obviously they're interested in accounting being that new direction for them. We've got 26% who are actively applying for jobs in accounting. So they might be interested to hear of some of the kind of skill sets and kind of qualifications that they'll need on their CV to really stand out. We've got 12% who are more just generally interested in accounting, want to hear more from the panelists that we've got here today, and 15% who are actually starting their career and accounting looks like it's going to be the direction that they're going into. So that just gives us some perspective of all the interests behind everybody who's on the call today, and hopefully we'll be able to answer as many of your questions that you have during the next 45 minutes. So back to you, Hus.
Thanks, Tom. So we'll come to the first part of the Q&A. So during the session, we're going to go to each of our panel and surface some of the questions we have. I'm going to start with Shalu and Francis on the first question, if that's okay. Shalu, what is a career like in accounting, and how has COVID-19 impacted the sector?
Thanks, Haz. I think a career in accounting is not just about being good with numbers or being analytical. I think a career in accounting today almost goes beyond the scope of just financial reporting, whereby your non-financial skills, i.e. your relationship building skills, your communication, your presentation skills, almost go hand in hand with your financial skills. And I feel like this type of evolution really comes from the fact that accountants today really add value beyond the scope of financial reporting. And I think in my line of work, for example, one of my key responsibilities is to manage the budgeting and forecasting process within the marketing team, which would be deemed your more kind of traditional accounting responsibilities. But I'm equally responsible for presenting recommendations to our directors, for example, which types of influencers we should be working with based on their return on investment. So, I mean, I say that to really illustrate the point that a career in accounting can really take so many different shapes, and there's such a wide scope of roles available. And then just following on the COVID question there, I think COVID has had a huge impact on accounting and financial professionals. I think ordinarily we play such a pivotal role in kind of supporting business operations. But I think what's really come out of the last 12 months is just how valuable our insights and how valuable our opinions are, and how we've really kind of helped steer businesses to like a healthy place through the last 12 months. And I think one of the things that myself and my team have really had to deal with in the last 12 months is coming from a retail high street type of industry is store closures, which has had a huge impact on us. So for me and my team, it's almost assessing, okay, with stores being closed, what's the impact on our P&L? What does our cash flow look like? What opportunities can we drive out of the website? So it's been incredibly challenging, but it again brings back to the point of how much our insights have been valuable, and especially in the last 12 months, you know, I think finance and accounting professionals have played a side-by-side role with, you know, the directors and the leaderships in terms of really helping to kind of steer the ship, you know, in the last 12 months.
It's a solid answer, Sheila. Definitely. I mean, the retail industry has been affected equally. Francis, you could say the same about the travel industry as well, couldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can jump in and answer the question about COVID-19 first, to follow on from that, if you like. Because speaking as someone in the tourism industry, our business was very negatively impacted by the pandemic. And I think what happened actually was that brought finance to the forefront of the business. Cash was suddenly being watched by everybody around the business. As a result of the uncertainty, multiple forecasts were being prepared based on different scenarios and constantly being updated. At Carib Tours, where I am, if people can't travel internationally, we don't make any money. So we had to look at forecasts based on different times that international travel might resume. And we're still doing that. And then constantly revise these forecasts as circumstances changed. We had to find ways to reduce as many costs as we could. We had to plan for how long we could survive as a business with no income. And then as various support measures were announced by the government, we had to look at how they worked, how we could access them, and then update our forecasts when we knew that we could furlough staff and how furlough staff worked, and based on applying for CBILS and how we could qualify for the government loans that were supporting the industry. Additionally, in our industry, travel is a regulated industry. So we also had to make sure that we remained compliant with the CAA's financial requirements, and then understand how the CAA and ABTA were supporting our industry and ABTA supporting the members. And they did that in various ways. They suspended elements of the package travel directive. They allowed tour operators to offer refund credit notes instead of cash refunds if that's what the customers wanted, allowing us to hold on to more cash. And so all of this required planning. It required constant forecasting, and was really quite difficult because we were trying to predict outcomes on situations which we had no past experience to draw on. So it was, yeah, challenging time in finance, but finance was definitely at the forefront of the business during the pandemic. In terms of in normal times, what a career in accounting is like, I echo a lot of what Shilu says, and the finance department is involved in all aspects of the business. So a career in accounting gives you a role where you get an insight into all of the business. That's something I enjoy, seeing how all of the parts of the business fit together, providing information that incorporates different parts of the business and influencing decisions. I started out working for large corporates where you don't always get a wide picture of the business until you become more senior. One of the first roles where I noticed how finance can have an impact on the business as a whole was when I was finance manager for the US division of TUI. I became quite curious when I was looking at the management accounts, preparing the management accounts each month, why the gross margin seemed to vary so much each month. And I started producing a report which showed the percentage of different items sold each month and the margins on each. I passed this report onto the sales team, and they used it to focus on selling the most profitable items. Within a few months, we saw improvement in margin, and being able to see the impact of business decisions translated into profit is something that's really rewarding.
I like that example, Francis. It's basically like a carpenter saying, you know, I've built this. See how where it's got taken us. So it's a good point there. Thank you for sharing that, both of you. Now, move to the next question. As someone who's new to the industry, what are transferable skills we could bring? So, Francis, I might just keep you on stage for this one as well, please. How would you tackle this one, please?
I think if you're looking to change career, then consider what industry you're in now. Understanding the business is important in understanding the finances of the business. So think about the environment that you currently work in or that you last worked in, and what you know about the business, and think about how you can use that experience in a finance role. If, for example, you're working in retail or manufacturing, you probably know about stock control. In retail, you probably know about sales patterns. Bringing your experience from another department in the same industry into the finance department is really valuable, I think. I'm speaking very much here as someone who's SEMA qualified and who's always worked in industry, but I think this is also valuable in practice if you want to go down that route as well.
Thank you for that, Francis. Alistair, could you help us with this answer as well, please?
Sure, yeah. Well, I've actually worked quite a few industries and jumped from one industry to another. So one of the things around financial skills is that they are transferable from one industry to another. So that can be in, as Francis says, in manufacturing, or it could be retail. But some of the industry specific things actually don't really hold you back. You can move across quite easily. And look at some of the skills that a couple of years ago, I actually hired a team from scratch. I went to an organization, I had to recruit people from some senior, some qualified, some middle part qualified, and some people who were clerical. And I was thinking of the skills that I was looking for recruiting a team. And what Shilu was saying earlier, I really reiterates around some of the soft skills that are so important now, such as organizing yourself. So thinking of the skills that you can bring, so how you organize yourself. Just when your task is given to you, do you complete it? Do you communicate it? Your ability to work in teams where you are at the moment, that's really important, because finance is actually just part of a process. It's you're part of a group, you deal with every part of the business, so you are just part of the process. So you need to speak to people who are not in finance. So if you're coming from something that's not in finance, that skill is something you can bring to the party effectively. A couple of things as well when you're thinking about what skills you can bring. The skills of taking on new challenges. I think in whatever you're doing at the moment, if you're prepared to show that you're taking on any new challenge in whatever you do, that is really important. And so very few of us have a job that we keep in that same position for long. Something always comes along and we have to take on something new. So the ability to adapt to change and in whatever field is really important. And then one last thing I'd say about what skill you can bring, whether it's a skill or a soft skill, it's enthusiasm. Just being able to show enthusiasm is for me really important. When I was recruiting this team, if people would present themselves and go, what I was doing before I was with enthusiasm, it really fires up people who want to bring you in.
I couldn't agree with you more. Attitude definitely sells. So thank you both for that response. Now, to understand what to prepare for a job in accounting, I'm going to come to Teresa and Shalu to help us answer this question. Teresa, do you want to have a go at it first, please?
Yep, thank you for that, Huss. So I think there's two areas really that I think is key to preparation for a good interview. So I'm going to call these the two keys of interviews, so preparation and personality. So in terms of preparation, I think it's a really good idea to do some research in terms of the company that you're going to be interviewing for. So there's lots of free information out there. So if you've got a limited company, you can go onto Companies House and very easily look up their last financial accounts return. That will give you a wealth of information. So some of the stats, so things like turnover, gross profit, EBITDA, things like that, so you have those facts to hand. But also, if you look at the notes to the accounts, you can quite often find some information in there about the challenges that the business have had or the strategies that they're using. And so that gives you an insight a bit more into the company. If it's a public company, usually on their website, they'll have their annual reports that are on their website. You might have to look into the About Us section or the history section. And they also quite often do half-year reports, and that gives you a flavour of what challenges the business is facing, especially at this point during COVID. There's lots of information in there about how those companies are adapting because of COVID. And if you have some of that knowledge when you go into the interview, it shows you're really interested in that company. And then equally important in terms of that research on the company is what's the culture and values of the company. You can look again at the company website to look at the values. You can look at places like Glassdoor to see feedback that employees have been given about working in that environment. You can look at LinkedIn and stalk the people that work at that company and look at what kind of people they are. And it just gives you that insight into the company. And I think that was really good preparation for when you go in. And lastly, just look to see if there's any news articles that have been in the press recently about that company, or if they've won any awards or any initiative things that they're doing, such as community participation. It just helps that you know and you understand that business. And also the industry. What industry does that fit in? Are there any facts or general trends in that industry at the moment? That's in terms of the sort of preparation. And then I'll echo some of the other comments from the panelists. The second area is personality. It's a bit of an urban myth that accountants are quiet and maybe a little bit dull and like to sit in their office, but it's totally not true. And I think if you can go in and show a bit of passion and enthusiasm for finance and for that particular job or that particular industry, that will really set you out from the crowd. And we've talked about transferable skills, and as we saw from the poll, there's quite a lot of people on this webinar who are transferring from another industry. So maybe go through and have a look at the job description and see if there are areas of work that you can give examples in your current role that are similar. And they can be quite abstract, even if it's things like teamwork. You know, are you involved in a sport where you work as a team, or are you working on a project in the job that you do now. It doesn't have to be finance related, but something that shows the ethos of what the job description is looking for. And then ask some really good questions. Always be prepared to ask some questions because it shows that you're interested in that role. I always have a little rule of thumb to ask one question about the job and one question about the culture of the business. And it gives you a sort of a rounded feedback for them to see what you're interested in the role.
That's a really good template to follow, Teresa. Thank you for sharing that. I just had a mental thought because it looks like you're outdoors. I felt like we're going live to an external location. I felt like a BBC interview here today.
Yes, I'm live from King's Cross.
Thanks for that, Teresa. Shalu, do you want to help support us with this question as well, please?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with all the points that Teresa's just covered off there. I think they're really strong considerations. I think the only thing that I'd probably add to that, and this is definitely something that helped me very early on in my own career, is that really treat each of these interview processes separately. I think, for example, if you've got 3 interviews scheduled within the same week, there will be a certain element of your preparation which will kind of overlap across them, but really treat each interview separately. You know, research the business, get under the skin, what's the structure. And then I think one of the things, given that we've had this year of COVID/pandemic, one of the things that would be a really strong kind of suggestion to go into interviews with is just researching how that company were impacted by, whether it's a tourism company, whether it's fashion retail, store closures. And I think getting into that kind of current affair kind of research view, I think is quite strong. You can always tell when candidates have, done the kind of basic preparation. I think candidates really stand out when they've absolutely done their research. They know the business, they're passionate about the industry, and it's very apparent. I think with me and my team, I tend to hire kind of senior analyst type roles, and I think a lot of the times I have candidates who can clearly demonstrate that they have both financial and non-financial skills. It's those candidates that stick out for me that have clearly done a lot of research into the business, into the industry, in the time in which we're currently in, how that may be impacting, and really tailor your questions around kind of current news topics, current things. I think that's really strong. But yeah, I would definitely say treat them individually and really try to kind of get under the skin of each of these businesses.
I think definitely proper nosedive. Thank you for that, Shiloh. Tom, looks like it's audience time. Should we hit them with some questions, please?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Thank you, firstly, to everybody who's already left a question. For any of you wondering how to do so, if you look at the bottom of your window, you should see a Q&A icon, and that's where you can leave questions for the panel. I've got a question here for Francis, just kicking off. This is more of a kind of general, I guess, industry question, but is there a future for bookkeeping, or is it likely to be replaced by technology?
That's a good question. I think there is a future for bookkeeping. I think technology is maybe changing it. I think also overseas sort of data centers are potentially changing it as well, in terms of people outsourcing some of the bookkeeping elements. But I think there is still a need for human intervention in that.
That should be, I hope, good news. Unfortunately, I don't have the name of the individual who asked that, but I hope that helps. Second question for Shalu. This is from Julius. In fact, it's quite nice to read some of the questions. We've got a few entrepreneurial people on the call today, which is fantastic to hear. Julius says, I'm 27 years old. I have my own clothing store business, and I'm currently studying SEMA. I have a problem finding a job as an accountant assistant. Would you suggest any other jobs I should apply for, such as maybe a payroll assistant or a management accountant? What are my chances of getting a job with no experience in the field?
I think that's a good question. And I think there's probably 2 things that stick out to me for this question. I think the first thing is the fact that you have your own business is amazing. I think running your own business, again, you'll have so many valuable non-finance skills. So I think if you are trying to get your foot in the door in your first kind of finance accounting type role, don't forget to really hone in on those non-financial skills that you clearly would have acquired and nurtured in running your own business. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, and this is definitely something that, you know, was definitely the case for me when I first started in my career, is you have to have a very open mind when when you're first trying to get your foot in the door. And if I give you an example, for me, I think my first job straight after university was actually a billing role, and I absolutely had no intentions of pursuing any kind of part of my career within a kind of billing role. But it was when I actually got my foot in the door, and I didn't realize how many other skills you learn, irrespective of what role you go into. For example, going into billing, it really steps up your Excel skills. And again, that's incredibly important, no matter what type of accounting role you take. So I think if you're trying to get your first foot in, really be open-minded, because there's skills to be acquired and skills to be nurtured in any of these different types of roles you pursue, you know, whether it's AP, AR, whether you go into kind of management accounts. There's so many different skills you'll acquire. So I think definitely be open and don't, you know, really kind of bring in your non-finance skills, because I think that will be really valuable.
Amazing. Hopefully that helps, Julius. Some really good value shared there. Thank you, Shirley. Final question before we move on. We do have a second part for Q&A, and I know there are a lot of unanswered questions out there. But one for Teresa. Actually, similar. We've got another business owner here, or has been running their own small business. This is a question from Bola. I've been away from accountancy for over 18 years. But in the meantime, she's been running a small business, she's had children, etc. She was at the final stage of her ACCA exams and wants to return to the profession and has started finalizing those ACCA exams. How would you suggest that she resumes her job search and gets experience?
So again, I think some of the, it crosses over with the last question a bit really, but being open to the type of role. I'd also say probably look at the industry. So you might have more chance of success if you look for an SME business or a startup business or a growing business. And quite often in those roles, even if you go in, say as a billing, as an example, which I agree is a great place to start, you often, because it's a small team, you get exposure to everything, especially if it's a business that's scaling or growing. You can move around within that team really quickly. So I would also say that's a good area to look at. So stick with a small finance team, a small business, that you can be immersed in the whole team and learn different parts of the role. And then also I'd always advocate, if people are struggling to get experience, looking at the voluntary sector. You know, I do a few voluntary roles, and it can be just things like helping out a local charity or a local community centre with things like their finances or fundraising. Again, that just gives you transferable skills and shows actually that you're committed to your profession.
That's great. Okay, thank you very much, Teresa. I hope that helps, Bola, and good luck to both you and Julius in your job searches going forward. We've actually got a section coming up on qualifications and learning around accountancy. So I know we've got a few questions that have already been asked around that. So we'll come back to the Q&A section a little bit later. Huss, back to you.
Thank you, Tom. Teresa, I like the point about the practical experience there, specifically working with charities and volunteering, because that can be a real sure way of finding work and getting that practical experience, but also showing the right mindset. Okay, so last question before we move on to the qualifications. Alistair, tell us about your career. What did you do to get into accounting, please?
So I started in the sort of traditional graduate entry coming out of university. I had a degree in economics and was playing all the large corporates looking for roles. And I'm Scottish, as you can tell by the accent, and I started in London with Epson, who at that time were a fledgling IT company, who many of us will now making printers for across the world. So I was their initial graduate trainee in finance. And when I think back on how I got that role, I think I got that role because it was a what difference do you offer from all the other graduates? So the things were for me was I worked in a factory in the summer holidays, and in that factory I did this sort of the normal factory work, then got picked out to do a costing system, which sounds very grand, but in reality was just looking at all the products they made and getting bits of paper and getting organized and putting it together. But it allowed me something different to talk about. And I think that's something that comes out when you're looking for something here is what's different. And it could be voluntary work. It could be running a small business that you have on the side. It could be things that you're just different from something else. So I got into there, and part of the package there was getting trained on SEMA. And another thing to consider if you get fortunate into a role is what are the company offering you when you go into these roles. So what's the package that the organization are going to give you? I went to college one evening a week and then got through SEMA that way. But also, have you got a mentor? Because I had a mentor there who was really helpful and allowed me to get into brand new things in the organization. It was a very fast growing company at the time. So luckily I was given lots and lots of opportunities to try new elements of finance that as being the graduate training got thrown into. So having a lot of variety is important. So that's how I got into it, qualified, and then I've just been able to move from various positions over the years. And I also, being in finance, it gives you the opportunity to even move back then to other parts of businesses. I've been in sales and marketing. I've worked in IT teams. So, and that finance background allows you to mix with other parts of the business. And then also what has become very popular now is being the finance business partner. Having done that now many times of supporting another function. So you're the finance person for another function. So it just gives you there's lots of variety, but that starting point is it's what many of you may be considering now if you're coming out of college, university, is what's different that gets you noticed from not just the qualification on your CV.
Thank you for that, Alice. That's a really solid response there, especially. I like the story about you working on the factory floor. Did you get I may have to pick that one up with you at the pub.
It was shopping trolley, so if they don't go straight, or they didn't go straight years ago, it was my fault.
I'll let you know next time I'm at Asda. And Teresa, can you help us complete this question, please?
Yeah, so I actually ended up in a career in accounting quite by chance. I actually wanted to be a pilot in the Royal Air Force and applied and didn't make officer selection. So had a bit of a sort of what the hell am I going to do with my life moment. And I'll be honest, in those days we had the metro that you picked up on the tube, and I looked at the jobs and I thought, what's paying the most money? Finance, I'll go into that. But I was really fortunate. I got a job at the life trading floor, which was a fantastic experience. If you think of Wolf of Wall Street, it was pretty much like that when I first joined, which was great. And then whilst I was there, I really enjoyed finance. I got the opportunity to work in each different team within the finance business. So I started off doing expenses and then did accounts payable, accounts receivable, financial accounts, management accounts, and they also sponsored me to do AAT. And so I also had this sort of Sunday morning studying, coming into London, going to college, whilst working during the week. But I think it's really valuable because, you know, when you have those qualifications, you definitely get much more recognition. Your CV stands out from the crowd. You get more success in being selected for interview. And then personally, I think it gives you confidence. I don't necessarily think having a qualification necessarily always means that you can do the job any better or worse, but it certainly gives you much more confidence. And also it opens up a whole network to you because you have your fellow students, you have your fellow qualified professionals, you have mentors. You can get mentor support from accounting institutions, and you always have someone else to talk to and someone else to bounce ideas off of.
Thanks. I feel at the end of this session, I might want to become an accountant. Now, to hear more about getting into accountancy and the types of qualifications, I'm going to pass it on to Karen. Now, Karen, I introduced you earlier, but can you tell us a little bit about eCareers and why your team helps shape the future of accounting for budding professionals?
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, so with eCareers, we run AAT, so we do offer level 1, but a lot of students go straight into level 2 and then progress hopefully to level 4. So how the course is sort of structured, it's very flexible, which I think given the current climate, a lot of students I've been liaising with have actually utilised the furlough time to study. So if they're looking at a career change, they've actually utilised that time to sort of, plan for the future and change what they're doing. So if I sort of focus more on level 2, which is where most students would start, you don't have to have any prior qualifications to start at level 2. So it's not sort of restrictive for students to join. So, if you start the level 2, you cover a lot of the underpinning bookkeeping knowledge and your sort of basics for your sort of management accounting. And I think it's a fantastic way then, if you're looking at changing careers, that you've then got that on your CV, that you've been proactive, you've started studying, and quite often then when students are sort of well into the level 2, they will then be able to get a new job, hopefully in the role that they want, and progress their way up to level 4. So how it's sort of structured, we do online learning, lots of sort of live sessions that are all recorded that students can then watch back in their own time, which works well. So obviously everyone's working different hours, so sort of going back to what I said before, it is really flexible. So once you've studied level 3, you can then apply for membership with AAT, actually AAT QB membership. Once you've studied up to level 4 and completed that, you can then apply for MAAT membership. So I think from a sort of workplace point of view, getting a new job, changing careers, it's a fantastic qualification to study. I can't praise it enough. It's actually what I did myself. I only had GCSEs, I didn't do A-levels, didn't go via the uni route. So I literally hopped around, wasn't too sure what I wanted to do work-wise. And by studying AAT, it has literally got me all the work that I do now. And it's a fantastic progression into CIMA as well. So once you've studied AAT in full, you will then get exemption from the first level of your CIMA. So BA1 to BA4, you'll get exemption from that. So fantastic progression as well. Level 4 covers a lot of report writing type questions. So from an employability point of view, you're sort of more prepared then for the workplace and the sort of work that you'd have to be doing. So yes, I think that pretty much covers everything. So it's like I said, it sort of contains online learning. We have the Kaplan study texts, which are brilliant. A unit on Sage as well. So they've got the computerized background, computerized accounting background knowledge as well as that. So it's just an all-round good mixture. If students are not too sure, on the career path, it's such a diverse qualification to have. I thought when I started studying, just sort of working in practice at the time, I thought that was where I was going to stop, but I've sort of realised how diverse it is, which is why I've ended up in education. Also worked as an examiner, so it's very, very flexible that you can do. So as we've got on the screen there, yes, if you apply for the level 2 and 3 combined, you will also get a free laptop, which is brilliant, because you will need a computer laptop to be working through the AAT content as well. All of the exams are computer based, and yeah, the students get on really well. Excel's covered at level 3. I think that was mentioned before earlier on. So cover Excel at level 3. So yeah, just an all-round good qualification with progression to CIMA, like I mentioned before.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Karen. Thank you for the advice there. I'm going to pass now on to questions from the audience. So Tom, back to you in the studio. Do you mind just coordinating the questions we have from our audience today, please?
I wish I was in a studio house. I am in my bedroom, which will do for now, I'm afraid. We've had a few questions in relating to kind of learning which, whilst we've got you on the call, Karen, we might as well ask. A question from Aurelia. I'd like to start my accounting career. Could you recommend any specific course? I finished studying financial and banking, which was a bachelor's degree. So what would you recommend for Aurelia, Karen?
Based on what you've said, I would, if you go on to AAT, there's like a skills checker that you can actually complete, and that will indicate what level of AAT you should start at, because if you jump in at level 4, for example, it's assumed knowledge of level 2 and 3. So I wouldn't want to sort of say start at level 4 because you've got another qualification, because you then wouldn't have the underpinning knowledge. You don't have to do all of the level 2 exams to be able to sort of start at level 3. So it's quite flexible. You can enter at any level. But like I said, it's assumed knowledge of the level underneath or levels underneath. So I would just do the skills checker on AAT and see what level that's advising that you start at. If you've got really good double entry bookkeeping skills, then yes, it's probably likely that level 3 would be a good place to start. But I think it's important to get the underpinning knowledge so you fully understand that, rather than just go in to level 4 and not understand. So I think it makes it a lot harder for you. So yeah, definitely complete the skills checker on AAT, which if you just type in AAT skills checker, you'll find it. Work through all the questions on there, and it will then tell you at the end what level you should start at. And that's a good sort of yardstick as to what you should do.
That's great. I didn't know about that skill checker, so that's something that we'll make sure we include in the resources section of the email that we send out after the call. So thank you for that, okay. Karen. Another question for you, Karen, very quickly whilst you're here. Martina asks, I'm studying AAT level 2. Will this certificate be enough to find my first job in accounting without any experience in finance?
Yes, if you've started level 2 and you've sort of worked your way through at least some of the units, definitely, because you've then got it on your CV that you're currently studying AAT. So you could be looking at getting like a junior accounts position in a company, whether that's practice or whether you're sort of looking at more management accounts. But yes, definitely you could apply with that, because you've already got that. You'd have probably started with bookkeeping transactions, so you've got that basic underpinning knowledge. So yes, definitely. And I have had students that have got work and done a career change at level 2. So yes, it is possible.
That's great. I hope that helps, Martina. A question from Ina. I guess actually more just building on skills in general that's required for accountants. Is it worth investing in IT skills like Sage courses, for example? Karen, again.
Yep, I would definitely say so. Companies use a variety of accounting software. Larger companies will have bespoke systems, but I think by studying Sage, it gives you the underpinning knowledge as to how the computerized accounting systems work, which you can then transfer those skills that you've gained from studying Sage to a different package if you go to a company and they're using something different. So it's transferable skills and just shows that you have got an awareness of how a computerized package works. So definitely, yeah, definitely do that.
Thank you, Karen. A question for Teresa. Actually, this individual hasn't left their name, but if you're over 50, are you likely to struggle to get into a career in accounting? This is actually a common question we get in some of these in the webinar series that we've done across many different subjects. Older people worried that they won't be able to start or change into a career at an older age. Have you got any advice for this individual?
Yep. Again, I don't think that's the case, because obviously with age comes experience, and also a lot of the areas of finance, you need to be quite cool and calm, and sort of deal with things under pressure. And a lot of people who are a little bit older have experience with that. And I think also with finance, there's quite a lot of options for part-time working, or job shares and things like that. So it lends itself quite well to older people or people that are returning to work after having a family. And I think in accountancy, people find that age and experience quite valuable and a safe pair of hands. I certainly wouldn't have any qualms about recruiting anybody of any age. It's more about what skills they can bring and what personality they can bring to the role. Again, I would say probably look for those smaller businesses who, you know, maybe have a smaller finance team and would value that age and experience within that small team.
You're never too old. That's good to hear. Thank you very much, Teresa. More of a kind of technical question again. Well, not really. It's a terminology thing. For you, Alistair, what's the difference between a credit controller and a finance controller?
It sounds like an exam question. So a credit controller is someone who looks at at your customer base and the credit that's been given to that customer and how they're paying and should they get more credit or are they paying. A finance controller is more technical accounting. So you are looking at it would be you're doing the accounting for the organization, you're putting controls over the organization. So they sound very similar, but they're actually two quite distinct roles. The financial controller will have specific levels of qualification required, as would a credit controller, but they are credit responsibilities and not accounting responsibilities.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much for explaining that, Alistair. A question for Francis. This is actually from Mohammed. Mohammed has a master's degree and more than 10 years in the public sector as a civil servant. He's now considering a career in the accounting sector. What would you recommend for Mohammed, Francis?
I suppose it depends what sort of accounting industry you're looking at. If there's a specific industry you're looking into, are you looking to transfer within the civil service and work in finance within the civil service, or do you want to move out and move into industry or third sector accounting? I'm sure as a civil servant that you will have a lot of very valuable experience doing what you've been doing for the last 10 years. And I'm sure there's lots of diplomacy and negotiation and interaction that's involved in that in your role as a civil servant. And I think look at those skills, look at the soft skills that you have, and also what experience you've gained in that to use that to look at move to a different potentially industry or career in accounting.
Thank you, Francis. I hope that helps, Mohammed. Good luck in the future. I'm afraid we're going to have to start wrapping up the questions. It's now 12:55, and obviously we want to respect everybody's time. So this is unfortunately going to be the last question. If you have a question, a burning question that hasn't been answered in the session today, our apologies. What we're going to do is we're going to give the LinkedIn details of all the panelists who spoke today in the email that we're going to send after this event. So look out for that. If you'd still like to ask a question directly to one of the panelists who you feel would be most appropriate to answer it, they're more than happy. They've been very kind about offering their details, and they're more than happy to receive an answer as best as they can. But finishing off, a question for you, Shalu, and this is from Sabrina. Which companies would be ideal to gain work experience with while studying an AAT course? I guess this is kind of getting the experience in whilst you're studying so that when you come out the other end, you're ready to go and you've got some experience.
I think that's an interesting question, because I think from my experience, when I work in kind of retail high street fashion now, but I've worked in the logistics industry, pharmaceuticals. I think the interesting thing is at the beginning, early on in my career, I think the type of industry I'm going into, because you're just trying to get your foot in the door, I had to be very open in terms of the industry. I think as you further progress into your career, you have that kind of privilege to maybe go into a certain type of industry and pursue your career from there. But my recommendation would be, if you are studying and you're very early on in your career, be open, because I think one thing that I've learned is that I wasn't necessarily passionate about logistics, but my time working there, I learned so, again, I think working in different types of industry really nurture your skills quite differently, both your finance and non-financials. So I think be open to the type of industry. I mean, there might be a particular industry that you are passionate about and you want to pursue a career in. And I think in good time, that will always play out. But I think don't close any doors on any particular industries, because I've definitely worked in industries that weren't my kind of first choice, but you really do nurture a lot of your skills and pick up a lot of valuable skills to really get you to where you want to be. So I think, again, following on from my point earlier, just be open in terms of industry. And I think if you're studying at the same time, you'll be surprised, but they really interlink. Studying whilst working, learning at the same time, as well as being able to putting in practice, will be really valuable as well. So I think irrespective of your industry, I think, don't be worried about working and studying at the same time. I think they play quite well hand in hand.
Thank you very much, Lou. I hope that helps, Sabrina. And to everybody who did ask a question, thank you very much for them. Apologies if we didn't get around to yours. And like I said, look out for the email after the event. Over to you, Huss, just for the final wrap up.
Thank you, Tom. I think this part's just giving everyone the last little sharp tip. What could they take away from the hour they've had with us today? So, in any order, would you mind sharing what your final tip to our audience is, please?
Shall I go first? I would say career in finance, it's not just about the numbers. It's about the people. It's about communicating with other people. It's about working in teams. It's really much about soft skills now, and don't be hung up about it's all about numbers.
I think a tip from me would be one thing that I have found incredibly helpful is networking. LinkedIn is a fantastic tool. Don't be afraid to send messages to people that you think that their insights and experience will be valuable to you. I think you'll be quite surprised at how many people are willing to help. So definitely use LinkedIn, network, build your own network, and send people messages to try and get a little bit of advice where you can.
I think the tip. Sorry, Teresa.
Sorry.
Sorry, Teresa, you go ahead.
Thank you. I think I would just say really to just make sure when you're going through those roles that you bring to that interview your personality, your passion and your enthusiasm for finance and for the industry, and that will really make you stand out from the crowd.
And my tip was going to be what we've heard already, really. Think about what skills you have, what experience you have to date, even if it's not in finance. Don't let that put you off. Think about how you can apply the skills that you've developed in a finance situation.
I should go next. I think my tip would just be to have the confidence to do that career change. There's nothing better than studying new qualifications. I actively try and study something new all the time. I just think it improves your confidence, it makes you more employable, and it looks great on your CV. So definitely have the confidence to do it. There's a lot of people out there studying. There's a lot of different groups on social media. I know with our own students, they have sort of WhatsApp groups going to support each other. And obviously I'm one of the tutors, so I'd support you as well. But I think it's just having that confidence to take that step and learn something new, whatever your age. A lot of our students are mature students that are looking for a career change. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Thank you all. So just to summarize that, think about your soft skills, what your transferable skills you can be, network, show that personality with enthusiasm, and, fortune favors the brave. So yes, thank you for all of that. I want to say thank you to our panel for putting together a really solid session here today. Karen, thank you very much for giving us a gateway into accounting. Tom, this is our 8th session. I hope there's more of these. I love working with you on these webinars. And to our audience, you'll receive an email after today to tell you a little bit about the webinar. You'll have the YouTube link and also some feedback for you to give back to us. I really hope today has made a difference in your search and quest to become an accountant. And we all hope you have a great afternoon ahead. Thank you for your time.